Happy Monday. We made it through another week of football. Can you believe we are almost finished with week 14? But we do have a couple more games tonight, and that's why y'all are here to hear what we've got going on for the rest of the day. Thank you so much for joining us. This is Britt's Fantasy Blitz. And of course, I'm your host, Britt Flinn. We've got a ton of stuff to talk about today. As always, we'll do a little Sunday night football recap, which, spoiler alert, I'm super excited about. We'll talk about some DFS plays for tonight's doubleheader game, some bold predictions for tonight, and as always, get to our sleeper picks. Thank you so much to our producer, Brian Burns, doing a wonderful job as always. But let's just dive right in and talk about Sunday night football because I am super, super excited. And yes, Robert in the chat, how about them Cowboys? I really need a Cowboys counter on this show like they have on the Fantasy Alarm Show on SiriusXM. You hush it, Burns. You hush it. The Eagles have now lost back-to-back games. There were just a ton of turnovers and offensive miscues all over the place. And with that loss, the Cowboys now hold the number 2 seed at 10-3. Now, that said, the Eagles still do have more divisional games with the NFC East, so that could change if their record ends up better in the division. But it's going to be very, very interesting to see how this plays out. And I, for one, am just super stoked about the whole situation. My dad texted me about Shaquille Leonard going to the Eagles instead of the Cowboys, saying that he wanted to play with the dogs. Well, the Cowboys defense had the dogs, and he ended up sitting up on the sidelines. So, how well that works out, we'll have to wait and see, but still super exciting. So, let's just start out and talk Cowboys. They got off to a red hot start. They drove the ball downfield and they capped it off with a Dak to CeeDee Lamb touchdown. That finished off the sleeper picks that I put out yesterday morning. I had CeeDee Lamb anytime touchdown. I had DJ Moore more than 67.5 receiving yards, although he barely got there. He did still get there. And then I had Patrick Mahomes less than 2.5 passing touchdowns. So that worked out well for me yesterday. It was great to get that out early in the game. Brandon Aubrey kicked and made a 60-yard field goal along with all the other field goals that he made. And I'm not going to lie, I was sitting there screaming, like, why are we kicking it from here? What are we doing? And then I subsequently celebrated. He just had yards to spare on that. 30 for 30 on field goals this year. Even a couple of the kickoffs reached and bounced off the crossbar. This guy has a bionic leg. And yes, Death Wish, I believe Aubrey is a god. Absolutely insane. And Dak went 24 out of 29 for 271 yards and 2 touchdowns. It really does seem like he is in the driver's seat for MVP now. Last week, Brock Purdy had taken over and Dak was tied with Jalen Hurts. Now it does seem like Dak may be making a push, although there is an argument to be made for Tyreek Hill and Christian McCaffrey. The MVP award does seem like it is a quarterback award. So really excited to see if Dak can do that, especially after all the haters. And again, if you haven't seen that commercial, go check it out. Tony Pollard had a pretty decent night, not so much on the ground, only 16 for 59, but he did have 7 for 37 through the air, which when you play in PPR leagues is absolutely what you want to see. Jake Ferguson also had a day, 5 receptions for 72 yards. CeeDee Lamb was a little bit quiet after that touchdown, but still finished 6 for 71 and a touchdown. And then Michael Gallup showed up to going 3 for 48 and a touchdown. So was pretty happy overall with how that entire offense played, how they were able to spread the ball around. And when you think that Mike McCarthy had an emergency appendectomy just on Wednesday, a few days before this game, made it even more impressive. Now for the Eagles. I'm not going to come here and crap all over the Eagles, but they were a little bit sloppy when it came to ball security. They turned the ball over 3 times. Jalen Hurts has now lost 4 fumbles on the season. A.J. Brown had a fumble. Devonta Smith had a fumble. It was just pretty sloppy all the way around. Fletcher Cox did recover a fumble that was punched out away from Dak and returned it for a touchdown, but that was the only touchdown that the Eagles had the entire game. The rest of it was through Jake Elliott and their kicker. And then Death Wish crap all over them. Yeah, that's the thing. If you talk trash, I expect you to show up and just own up to your mistakes. but when they lose, they just kind of go silent. So yeah, I believe that I will go with you and crap all over them. Hurts only went 18 of 27 for 197 yards, no touchdowns. DeAndre Swift only 11 for 39 and was completely absent in the passing game. AJ Brown had a decent day, 9 for 94, but still no touchdowns. And then Devonta Smith, 5 for 73. So I posed this question on Twitter a couple of weeks ago when Jalen Hurts started kind of looking not like the Jalen Hurts that we were used to seeing, wondering whether or not we were going to be worried about Jalen Hurts going into the fantasy football playoffs. After this game, I am a little bit nervous. Some of these games should be winnable, they should be easy, but I wonder if they just choose to go towards the ground game more because the fumbles, the miscues, things like that, I'm honestly a little bit worried about it. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And Gabe the Babes in here. I was going to ask if anybody needs a Monday Night Miracle. What is it? And you're asking, please let kicker Jason Sanders get at least 10 points tonight so you can stay in the playoffs. I feel like that can happen. There, the spread is 13 and a half. The Dolphins have just looked absolutely unstoppable. And Tennessee has not looked that great on both offense or defense. Let's just be frank. Grumpy says Aubrey over Tucker. Let's go, baby. And then if Dak wins MVP, I will jump off the roof of Jerry's world. Please don't do that, Grumpy. We love having you in the chat. And then one more from Death Wish. I need Tyreek Hill to outscore Nick Folk in PPR. Think you got that. That's pretty solid. So let's move on to some top news and recaps from yesterday because there were a lot of very interesting games. The first one being that it kind of looks like the Kansas City Chiefs are in a free fall. They've lost 3 of their last 4. Patrick Mahomes was not happy with the refs and or Kadarius Toney screwing up that hook and ladder play that would have given them the win. I really wouldn't be surprised if Toney is sent packing and the first thing that the Chiefs look for in the draft next year is a wide receiver. But come on, you cannot get on the podium and blame the refs. That was purely a mistake on your teammate. You should not have been given any notice that you were lined up offsides. Now, I guess there is an argument to be made. Maybe it should have been called and then moved back a few yards and just taken the penalty, but it is what it is. Hugging Josh Allen and saying that's the worst effing call I've ever seen is just unprofessional. I get that frustrations are high, but you've got to have a little bit of professionalism and maturity in that situation. And that was not shown here in this game. So maybe the Chiefs end up playing a road game in the playoffs, which is something that we haven't seen since Mahomes actually took over at quarterback, something that's going to be very interesting to watch. More news in the AFC. Zach Wilson is back, baby. He looked great. I think he took that chip on his shoulder from being benched and just really went out there and said, hey, look, I can still ball. 27 of 36 for 301 yards and 2 touchdowns. He definitely didn't look like the guy who had been benched. And it's really good news for the fantasy value for Garrett Wilson and even Breece Hall. On Friday's show, I mentioned that I thought that Breece Hall's fantasy value may go down a little bit because he wasn't going to get those passes that Tim Boyle dumps off to him. No, he, he was one of the leading receivers out of anybody, not just running backs in the early slate. So very good look for him. Joe Flacco has also been named the starter for the Cleveland Browns the rest of the season. Played extremely well in the win, going for 311 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 1 interception. He looked great. And now the Browns have a commanding spot in that 5th seed for the wild card. If they can continue to play this well and actually keep it together, I wonder if they're actually going to make a deep playoff run. The coaching and all of the adversity that they've been through, it's really a testament to how good that coaching staff is after losing Nick Chubb, losing Deshaun Watson, having Amari Cooper in and out of the lineup. Just everything that they've been doing is excellent. And it's really fun to see, especially for a veteran like Joe Flacco. In the San Francisco game, Deebo Samuel scored his 19th career rushing touchdown, which sets an all-time record for wide receivers. Is there anything that this guy can't do? He can get separation. He can gain yards after the catch. He can run the ball. I mean, I'm very concerned as a Cowboys fan of meeting up with the 49ers again because Deebo just looks completely unstoppable. And he showed that again yesterday. really exciting to see somebody who struggled with injuries early on in his career do so well down the line. Coop asking, is Joe Flacco elite? He has been elite in the past. I don't know if he still is. He's 38, 39 years old. I know I definitely do not feel elite in my 30s, but if he can come out and show that he can get Cleveland into the playoffs, then yeah, he might be back in that elite conversation. Unfortunately, mentioning Coop, put your earplugs in. The Patriots are officially eliminated from the playoffs as at the earliest time in the season since 2000. Definitely not what we want to see. I know at this time, Coop is just looking for draft picks and compensation at this point. So who knows? Maybe they can get it going a little bit down the stretch and still get a good draft pick. Finally, for the Minnesota Vikings, Nick Mullins replaced Joshua Dobbs in a terrible game against the Raiders. And I will tell you, it was awful, terrible. Dobbs looked awful. I firmly place the blame on him for that literal hospital ball that he threw to Justin Jefferson that got him taken to the hospital. I think the carriage has turned back into a pumpkin for Joshua Dobbs and the Vikings. They've definitely got to figure something out when it comes to the quarterback position. Before we get into injuries, there weren't a lot as far as our positional players, but there were very big names that happened. So we'll get to that. Um, Death Wish, I started the Texans defense and Zach Wilson turned into a superstar. Yeah, that's usually how it goes, right? As soon as you start a good defense, that's a sure thing. It always works out that way. Then Bobby, great to see you in here. Would I trade Stephon and Swift for CD in half PPR? Play this guy in the first week of the playoffs. Um, I don't really know if I would do that. I love what CeeDee Lamb has been doing, but like I mentioned earlier, the Eagles have a very soft schedule going forward where they go up against some very soft run defenses. I think that Swift is going to have better days than he did against Dallas. So I would hold on to Stephon and Swift even as much as I do love CD. Just seems like you're giving up a little bit too much there in that trade. And great to see you in the chat. And Robert, thank you so much. I do not consider myself elite, but I'm glad that you guys think so. And then, yeah, Rex, what happened to Mike Evans? I had him in the matchup previews over in on Fantasy Alarm. He has been so good over the past few weeks. The matchup was very good. I do not know what happened to Mike Evans. That's something I'm going to have to go back and look at in my process, whether it was game planning, whether I really don't know what happened. Super disappointing outing from Evans. But when he has a disappointing outing, next week he'll go out and put up, his traditional 40-point game. And that's just how it goes with Mike Evans. So jumping into some injury news, again, like I said, not a ton of fantasy relevant injuries, but the ones that happened were very, very major. Justin Herbert suffered a fractured index finger on his right throwing hand, and it could be season ending at this point. We are waiting on an MRI to get done today to determine the severity. Easton Stick is the backup. I think this is a complete downgrade to every single player on that Chargers offense, including Austin Eckler, who should have had a good game yesterday, and it was just kind of meh. Definitely not what you want to see. I've been riding Keenan Allen all season long. Do have Justin Herbert in a few leagues, with my backup being Jared Goff, and Jared Goff has also fallen off. So I will be scouring the waiver wire to look for a replacement for him. Make sure to check out that waiver wire article tomorrow on Fantasy Alarm because it's playoff time, baby. We got to make the right calls when it comes to finding these subs on the waiver wire. Another quarterback that we have to look at is CJ Stroud, as he is in the NFL concussion protocol. It's not exactly looking great for him. If you looked at the look on his face as he was being led to the locker room, he just kind of looked out of it, disappointed, obviously. We'll see how severe that concussion is and if he can go. Nico Collins also went out very early in the game with a calf injury. And we've seen with calf injuries, it can not only keep you out for several weeks, but if you try to rush it back, it can cause an injury to the Achilles. Really big blow to the Texans receiving core that already lost Tank Dell last week. So just disappointing circumstances all around for the Texans. Apologies and thoughts and prayers to you, Colby Conway, out there. We mentioned Justin Jefferson went to the hospital yesterday after suffering what was called a chest injury. News was encouraging after he was released and able to travel back with the team, but we don't yet know the extent of the injury. What I initially thought, and just a knee jerk reaction, I'm not a professional of any sort when it comes to medical injuries, but it did look like that helmet smashed him right in the kidney. We've already seen a couple players with lacerated kidneys, Luke Musgrave being one of them. That's what ended Andrew Luck's career. It's what kept Keenan Allen out of the lineup for such a long time at one point in his career. If that is the case, he's probably going to be out for a much longer. Hopefully, it's just a situation like a bruised rib, some bruised cartilage, things like that. But we're going to have to be very cautious when it comes to Jefferson, especially now with the quarterback situation. Just womp, womp. Finally, Josh Jacobs did suffer an ankle injury in that 3-0 loss against the Vikings. If he's unable to go and we hear some news on him, spoiler alert for tomorrow's waiver wire article, Zamir White may be one of the hottest pickups. And if you have any kind of fab left, you're probably going to have to blow most, if not all of it, to get White and plug in for Josh Jacobs there. So let's talk about a couple of the fantasy leaders. And the quarterback position is just very surprising to me. The number one guy being Lamar Jackson with 32.6 fantasy points. We were told all week that this game was going to have bad weather. The over under was very low. Instead, both teams lit it up. It was absolutely insane. Odell Beckham had a great game. Zay Flowers had a great game. Isaiah Likely had a great game. I picked him up to block somebody else, but I had Travis Kelsey. And so I'm not going to play Likely over Kelsey. But unfortunately, that ended up being the wrong decision. Just a great game by Lamar Jackson and the Ravens overall. The second guy, Desmond Ritter, 26.4 fantasy points. Where did this come from? Where did this Falcons offense come out of? Because they have not done anything all year long. Bijan got a touchdown. London had a great game. Even Kyle Pitts had a much, much better game than we've seen out of him. Very surprising for Desmond Ritter to go off. I will not say that that is going to be the norm going forward, but still very interesting if he was an emergency and you had to play him in a super flex or something like that. Then the third quarterback was Justin Fields. We pretty much expected this. Not a ton of passing, but getting it done with his legs is always the move with him. And great to see him back and healthy. So for running backs, I've got to toot the horn of one Mr. Ezekiel Elliott on the Patriots. Howard Bender kind of teased me and ribbed me a couple of weeks ago in my waiver wire article when I said that Zeke was a priority pickup. He thought that it might be just my Cowboys bias. But then Ramondre Stevenson gets hurt, and Elliott goes out there, not only gets it done on the ground, but does catch passes and catches a touchdown, something that you love to see from a guy that people have continuously said is washed. Next up, Brees Hall. I totally whiffed on this one. I did not think he was going to have the receiving upside that he did. 100% proved me wrong. 26.6 PPR points. He just looked great. The emergence of Zach Wilson really did help him and that offense as a whole. And then we have James Cook coming in third, utilized both in the receiving game and in the rushing game. Having Joe Brady as offensive coordinator has elevated James Cook to a level that I don't think many of us thought that we would see from him, especially after the start of the season. But he has had a few very good weeks back to back to back. And don't want to throw out a league winner quite yet, but he could be on the radar. For wide receiver, it's no surprise that it was Deebo Samuel. Those rushing touchdowns, everything that he does in the passing game is amazing. 34 fantasy points in PPR formats. Just, he's unstoppable. And he should be in your lineup every single week. Next up with Drake London, 29.2 PPR points. I know that he struggled against the Jets last week, but that's why we kind of play matchups because he did have a very good matchup this week. It also helped that Carlton Davis went out during the course of that game, so they lost yet another corner, but we're not going to complain. Why? Because it happened. Finally, we have DJ Moore at 26.8 fantasy points. Again, that Justin Fields connection that he's got is just chef's kiss. Now to tight ends. And this is where my process is just completely thrown out the window because I was fading Evan Ingram in every single format. He had a very tough matchup. There was supposed to be bad weather. Trevor Lawrence, was banged up. And to be fair, he didn't look great in the beginning of the game. He had thrown 3 interceptions before he finally got the ball rolling and started throwing touchdowns. But Evan Ingram absolutely smashed this slate. 32 and a half PPR points for fantasy, going up against a defense that had allowed the fewest fantasy points to the tight end position and ranked 29th in DVOA. Like Coop pointed out on Twitter, I'm never doubting Evan Ingram again. I think that he could be matchup proof at this point in the season. For the second person, kind of goes the same way, and that was David Njoku with 27.1 fantasy points. We were worried about Joe Flacco because he loves to air the ball out. He doesn't really like those shorter to intermediate routes, but he was really looking at Njoku this week, and it proved off. I just, that whole game, whoever the odds makers were, I have a bone to pick with you. I really do. And then coming in third was Isaiah Likely. Again, every part of that Baltimore Ravens passing game was just completely on fire, even in the rain, even in the wind. Whether who, I don't know about it. So with the defense, we've got the Saints 21 points, Vikings 20, and then Denver 14. Absolutely insane. These teams that have not been playing well finally had a great defensive game. Probably upset a lot of you playing against them. I know I was playing against the Vikings defense. Unfortunately, I think I'm still going to pull out that win, but man, it had me nervous for a little bit. We also have a couple fantasy duds that we'll hit on here just real quick. Not a lot to say about any of these guys except they're just disappointing, right? So Jalen Hurts, QB 20 with just 8.9 fantasy points. And then Jared Goff, QB 21 with 8.4 fantasy points. We know that he doesn't play well when he's on the road and especially outside, but I did expect much more out of him, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and Sam Laporta. But unfortunately, we got nothing. For the running backs, Zach Moss really disappointed me. He had a great matchup this week, only finished as running back 23 with 9.6 fantasy points. And then DeAndre Swift with the big old dud, RB 44 with 3.9 fantasy points. For the wide receivers, Stephon Diggs, wide receiver 44 with 6.4 fantasy points. Jordan Addison, wide receiver 54 with 4.7 fantasy points. Again, that quarterback situation is just not great there. Tight end, Dalton Kincaid. This is going to be the rookies who have done so well this season. But Dalton Kincaid, tight end 21 with 7.1 fantasy points. And then my baby, Sam Laporta, just tight end 29 with 4.7. Really disappointing outing for both of them. Let's hope that they can get it together because they have both been an integral part to many, many of my fantasy teams and playoff start. So I need them to get going and have a bounce back. For the defense, it was the Falcons, 0 points, but were we really counting on the Falcons anyway? I wasn't. So if you haven't signed up or checked this show out before, we do have a platform called the BetterCast app, and we're gamifying every single sport. Monday Night Football. We are also doing NFL team trivia tonight with Moose and Keith starting at 7 p.m. Then you can join us at 8:15 as we gear up for a doubleheader of Monday Night Football. You can answer the pregame questions and then answer the questions throughout the game as they're happening. And when you answer these questions correctly, you have the chance to win tickets that you can then redeem for real, authentic merchandise. Scan the QR code right here on your screen to download the app or go to the Apple app and Google Play stores. You must be at least 18 years of age to participate. I will be jumping in there tonight for sure, switching back and forth. I'll probably have it on dual TVs. Just be ready to go right there in that chat. I also mentioned our matchup previews that we have over at fantasyalarm.com. That is part of our All Pro subscription, which you can get by one, downloading the QR code right there, or go to fantasyalarm.com/win to sign up today. Use promo code Let's Go for 50% off of your first monthly payment. So as part of that, you get all of our tools, all of our sports. You get access to our Discord with all of our experts. Everything that the site has to offer, we've got right there with that All Pro subscription. So make sure to sign up right there and come hang with us. So we're going to take a quick break, but if you're looking for some DFS plays for tonight's doubleheader matchup, don't go anywhere. We will be right back with our DFS heavy hitters right now.
What can we expect for you out there on the track tonight?
Listen, I have a wife, 2 kids. I have, full-time jobs. I'm never nervous. I don't even know what that word means. Can you explain what nervous means? No. I'm ready to have fun. I've never done anything like this before. I got asked to be a part of this. This is fascinating. Like, it's so cool to just look around and see what goes on here. So I'm just excited to get out on the horse. And you want trash talk? Is that what you're asking me for? No trash talk. I hope everyone does well.
All right. Everyone's going to do well, but it has to be a winner. So give me your trifecta. Who's going to come in first, second, and third? Your heat.
I will go Maria 1, me 2, Willie 3, Moose goes 4th.
Well, it's very simple. I won this event last year. I won my heat, and so the defending champ has to be the favorite. Now, that makes me a little nervous just because I feel like it's hard to repeat. There's a little pressure when you're the favorite, but that being said, I'm still optimistic.
So your heat, it's you,
yes.
Moose and Keith from Better Sports Network, and Willie Colon.
I think Keith might be my stiffest competition, and I asked for this because I actually recruited Keith, if you didn't know. So Keith, if you win, you're welcome.
Malusis is very good. I mean, he knows what he's doing, but I'm going to go with Maria.
Keith is waving to the crowd. He must pay attention because they're off. It's Mark Malusis going for the lead. Maria Marino on the outside, and now Keith Irizarry on the outside with speed, and they're 3 wide into the first turn. Woo! Mark Malusis is locked in for his life. 138 and 2. They're into the stretch. Sportscasters Derby 2. And still in front, Keith Irizarry. And now Mark Malusis is trying to squeeze on through. Come on! Hey! Come on! Let's go! Take it! Yeah! Keith Irizarry. Keith, you did it all the way, wire to wire. Over Mark Malusis.
That was so cool. The champ is here. Keith, what was it like being out there? Adrenaline rush. You were doing the Instagram live, so there was no panic. You looked cool, calm, collected the whole time, and you won it.
I felt really comfortable. I did. Like, I know you were joking with me before. Are you nervous? Are you whatever? What are you? David, the driver, was awesome. He's like, we're gonna win this. I said, all right, let's win this. And he said, let's go. Yeah, I just felt really comfortable. I did. It was fun. We're in the lead. I got Maria Marino on the right side of me, and I'm like, oh my gosh, she's going to beat us, right? And then out of nowhere, you see Moose coming up this way, and we feel him breathing down our neck. And I'm like,
Moose on the loose, watch out.
Moose was definitely on the loose, and we just got Moose by a neck, a nose, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, but again, all of this for a great cause, and it was absolutely awesome to do this. It was cool.
All right, Keith, congratulations, and no matter what, you could always hold this over Moose's head.
Yeah!
And we are now going to talk about some DFS for tonight's doubleheader. We've got the Tennessee Titans traveling to Miami to face off against the Dolphins. And we also have the Green Bay Packers going to New York to play against the Giants. Before I get into that, I really want to say thank you to Death Wish. Thank you so much for jumping in and joining the show. Really always happy to have new viewers. And also thank you to Anne. I think that you're a rock star, and I'm really glad that you're a part of the family. So with that, let's get into this slate tonight. We do have a few more options since there are 2 games instead of just 1. Make sure to go read the playbook over at fantasyalarm.com, written by Dan Malin. But these are my personal breakdowns. Dan does point out, however, that this will likely be very chalky with a heavy emphasis on Miami. So keep that in mind when creating your lineups. It could be a night where the pot is split multiple ways just because everybody's going to be wanting these heavy hitters in their lineup. So to get to some of those heavy hitters, the first one is, of course, Tua Tagovailoa, 7,700 salaried on DK. He has thrown multiple touchdowns in 7 of his 12 games. And obviously getting Devon Achane gives them some more power in the run game. But Tua is averaging 300 yards per game at home, which is just against this Tennessee secondary is too good to pass up, in my opinion. I think he's going to be very chalky on this slate. But again, at only 7,700, I think his salary is too good to pass up. Next up, we've got Tyreek Hill, who admittedly is pricey, but then it's Tyreek Hill. This guy has been fantasy gold this entire season. He's averaging 26.1 fantasy points per game. If you look at his advanced metrics, number 2 in targets, number 1 in target share, number 1 in yards, number 1 in yards after the catch, yards per route run. You guys get the gist. We are getting him into our lineup, especially against this very soft Tennessee secondary. Another guy who has kind of been a hit and miss, who I want to try to squeeze into my lineup, though, is Saquon Barkley. And I really like Barkley this week. I know that he's been a little hit or miss as far as his fantasy production has gone, but he's really been consistent on the ground. I think the issue is just his touchdown production and just that lack of offensive efficiency overall with the Giants. But with Quay Walker of the Packers doubtful to suit up, and Green Bay's defense not being able to stop the run as it is, I really think he has a good night with a lot of receiving upside sprinkled on top, which we always love in a full point PPR format. Next up, we've got Devon Achane, who for the first time this season is priced higher than Raheem Mostert. Um, Honestly, I don't have a problem with that though. Even with 2 games, one in week 2 and one where he got re-injured, where he scored 1.5 points in those games, he is still averaging 21.4 fantasy points per game. I know that some people may be shying away from this run game because it is a little bit harder to run on Tennessee, but with Jeffrey Simmons out, it should be a little easier. And Achan's ability to move on the outside and just completely turn the rockets on, I really like him a lot today. If you don't want to go with Achane, if you want to go with a little bit cheaper option, there's also Raheem Mostert, who's 6,700 on DraftKings. All the hype has been around Achane and how great he's been doing this season, but Mostert has been very good in his own right. He's the RB3 on the year in PPR scoring. And even if Achane does take some of that work away, I think that there is a world where they both perform well. At his price, I think that you have to get him in your lineup. I will say people were a little bit concerned looking at the box score last week and looking at Achane snaps overall, but that game was well into hand when he finally started getting the carries and the snaps. 11 of his 16 touches came in the fourth quarter. So I think Mostert still has a lot of value, and I would not blame you if you wanted to play both of those guys. Just get them both in there if you can. But of course, to get all of these heavy hitters into your lineup, we've got to look at some mid tier options and some dart throws as well. So let's start by looking at the tight ends. Honestly, I don't really want to play any of them. I think that the options are a little bit gross with Daniel Bellinger, with Durham Smythe in there. So I'm really looking at Chig Okonkwo and Tucker Kraft as the only real options that I'm willing to play at tight end. But that said, I'm definitely looking at Romeo Dubs, who's only priced at 5,000 on DraftKings. With Christian Watson out, Dubs looks to be the top receiving option in that offense. And honestly, when he's been called upon, he has delivered. He scored 7 touchdowns on the season. And even though his numbers have fallen down a little bit with Watson back in the lineup, he does have a great matchup tonight against Adoree Jackson and Deontay Banks and the rest of that secondary that has allowed the 4th most fantasy points to the wide receiver position. I really like Dubs tonight. On the Packers side as well, I also really like A.J. Dillon, who's only 5,300 on DraftKings. Aaron Jones has already been ruled out. He just can't get healthy, and he's not ready to get back in that lineup just yet. So it will be the A.J. Dillon show once again. The Giants are also allowing 136 rushing yards per game. And even though there might be some Patrick Taylor sprinkled in there, most of these yards should go to Dillon. And I think he also has a little bit of receiving upside. So I like the Packers to go up early and then run the clock using A.J. Dillon. One of my favorite dart throws out of this entire slate, however, is Jalen Hyatt, $3,400 on DraftKings. He finally had a legit breakout week in week 12 where he had over 100 receiving yards, and I think he does it again. He really is entirely too cheap for me to not include in your lineup, especially with these other higher priced options. He's definitely not seen a ton of targets. I will give you guys that. But when he is targeted, he makes very, very big plays, averaging 19.41 yards per reception this year. And with Jair Alexander out and Darnell Savage questionable, I think he takes advantage of this matchup where they're going to have to throw quite a bit to stay in there. So that those are some of my favorite picks for tonight's doubleheader. But make sure to go to check over the entire playbook written by Dan Maitland over at fantasyalarm.com as part of that all pro package. And again, go to fantasyalarm.com/win. Use the promo code Let's Go for 50% off of your first monthly payment, or scan that handy QR code on the screen to get over there. So make Call of Duty great again. I win with 16.3 PPR points and could play Achan or Barkley. Who do we feel the more confident about? Man, I wish that you could just play both, to be honest. Um, I do think that Achan may be the safer play here just because of the spread. They are 14-point favorites here in this Dolphins game. I think that even though Saquon does have a good day, I think that they may switch it over to a more pass-heavy approach later on just to catch up with the Packers. So I think I would still go Achan here. I know it feels really weird. I wish you could get both of them in your lineup, but best of luck to you and your matchup tonight, and I hope that you continue on to the playoffs. So let's talk about some bold predictions for tonight. I'm just going to skip the break because I want to just go ahead and jump right into these guys. Um, I also want to hear your bold predictions for tonight. So if you have any, please throw them into the chat. I always love hearing them. My first one, however, is Jalen Hyatt. We just talked about him. I really believe in this rookie, and I think that he has another game of over 100 receiving yards. Remember when I just talked about his yards per route run average or yards per reception average and Jair Alexander being out? Yeah, that's why I think he has another huge game tonight. The Packers are only giving up 203 passing yards per game, but I think that that's more of a game script situation where teams can just look to run on them. If and when the Giants go behind, look for Hyatt to be heavily featured and break off a couple of big receptions right there. Next, I have Romeo Dubs has his first game of over 100 receiving yards this year. And I was looking at these stats, and it really did shock me that he hasn't had a game of over 100 yards yet this season because his fantasy points have been good based on that touchdown upside that he brings, but he hasn't had one yet. Adoree Jackson and Deontay Banks have just not been it in coverage this season. So I think he does have a favorable matchup. I also think that the Packers want to make a statement as they've crept back into the playoffs at this point, and they have been cooking with Jordan Love lately. So I love Romeo Dubs tonight. I also love Jaden Reed, if you want to sprinkle a little Jaden Reed in there. Next, I have Will Levis throws 2 interceptions and that the Dolphins win by more than 3 touchdowns. I know that Will Levis really wowed everyone in his first outing, throwing all of those touchdowns, just kind of breaking onto the scene. But I think that the shine has worn off with him entering this game. And he does have a very tough matchup against the Dolphins secondary. The return of Jalen Ramsey has only made them that much better. The Dolphins are actually -4 in turnover differential, which is why I'm including this as a bold prediction. But this secondary is different than how it was earlier on in the season. And I think that they take advantage of Levis and his miscues. Finally, to go back to the question, I think that Devon Achane has a receiving and a rushing touchdown tonight. And I don't really know how bold this prediction is, as Achane has been playing very well, but I'm counting on it because of how good Tennessee has been against the run. They've only allowed 106 rushing yards per game and just 3.25 receptions to the running back, which does rank first out of all the teams. But if Achane can continue to do Achane things against this defense, he is unquestionably matchup proof. And I love to see what this rookie has to offer. So Deathwish has a bold prediction that DeVito keeps his touchdown streak going, 25 for 30 for 250 yards and a touchdown. After Hyatt catches the ball, they pan to the scoreboard. Giants finally score. Packers 35, Giants 7. I don't think that you're wrong there. I think that DeVito actually has a decent enough night that he can rack up some fantasy points, but I don't know how that efficiency and scoring is actually going to go. So I think you could be on the right track there. Grumpy Sports Fan says Achane things, and we are all about those Achane things. I will just let you guys know somebody dropped him in a league that I was in after he got injured the second time. I'm not sure if they were looking for a bye week fill-in, didn't have room on their injured reserve, whatever it was, but I was able to scoop him up. And I'm very excited about the Achane things that he's been doing. Rex says Levis outscores Tua. That one is bold. I'm going to have to come back to you on that one. But again, if they get ahead and choose to run the ball, that could happen. It could be a game script situation. Anne says, I screwed up and left no one to pivot for Aaron Jones. Can drop Brian Robinson or McBride to pick up one of these guys. Oh, man. So I don't think that I would drop McBride. The only one who I think may have a little bit of a role is Patrick Taylor, but I don't necessarily like that. How's it looking? Definitely don't drop McBride. I want to know how it's looking if you're in the playoffs, things like that. Can you afford to take that 0, or do you absolutely need this win? Because dropping either of those guys, I think, hurts you going into the playoffs. And then Rex has another bold prediction. Tommy D cracks 300 yards and 3 touchdowns without Barkley scoring. All right, let's go here. I'm coming back to you. I'm keeping all these receipts for these bold predictions as we go forward. And I did say to be bold, so let's have fun with this. We're going to take one more quick break. Give me a chance to grab some water, all that fun stuff. Write down all of your bold predictions so I can keep some of these receipts. But when we come back, we will talk about my favorite sleeper picks for tonight's doubleheader. We'll be right back. Stay tuned.
Oh boy, we got a big one. We got a big card here. We got
baby, let's go.
We got a super rookie.
Ooh.
Do you guys want to guess who the big card super rookie is? Because
I'm going to guess somebody from the Dallas Cowboys, but I don't recall who were rookies in those particular years. So I'm going to guess Michael Irvin.
Adam?
Jared kind of convinced me to go Troy Aikman there.
I'm going to read the description. In this player's NFL debut, September 10th, 1989, he produced an electrifying 68-yard punt return for a touchdown.
Sanders.
He became the first athlete in the 20th century to hit a home run, September 5th, 1989, for the Yankees at Seattle, and score a touchdown in the same week.
That needs a sleeve. That one needs a sleeve.
Top
100%.
super rookie, neon, prime time, Deion Sanders.
I wasn't that far off. He played for the Cowboys.
I was going to say Deion, and then when you said the early 90s Cowboys, I'm like, oh, Aikman would be a good guess. So I go with your gut is the lesson there.
And there it is, the white and red Falcon jerseys that you said Deion came in with before they changed to black.
That was because the starting lineup for Deion his rookie year has got the red helmet with the white jersey.
Now look at that mean, are you kidding me with that hair?
I mean, you got to have a headband with those curls. You got to.
That is sick. And this is a favorite card. Do we have any value on this card? We have to, right?
Let me see.
Give me a value here.
Let's see here on eBay. PSA 10 gem mint Deion Sanders, $149.99. And then a 9.5 is $6. So that guy might be a little bit. Then there's a much more reasonably listed one at $31 for a PSA 10. So it's got some value to it. Yeah, you might want to protect that one.
It's in excellent condition. I guess we have to worry about, is it centered?
Yes, that would be the next thing.
All right. Well, we'll go through the process there. Maybe I'll just frame that one as a great moment in this show's history.
Have already spent almost an hour talking. I say this every show, but time flies when you're having fun. And I'm definitely having so much fun with all of you guys here in the chat. Football is one of my favorite things on this entire planet. And getting to chat with you guys as we get towards the end of the season is just something that's amazing. Before I do get into the sleeper picks, though, I want to address one of these questions in the chat from Ryan about Kenyon Drake. He might get some carries and some pass work. The reason that I'm not in on Kenyon Drake is that I still believe that he is more of a practice squad player. Patrick Taylor is ahead of him in the depth chart. I'm not sure how much of the playbook he knows, and by proxy, not sure how much work he's actually going to get in this game. I mean, he definitely could, but I feel more comfortable with Patrick Taylor out of those options that are left out there than I do with Kenyon Drake. So he is a total dart throw. In a DFS situation, might be somebody worth playing because I'm sure he's min priced, but in a season long league, I would lean towards Patrick Taylor. So let's get into our final segment of the show. Again, this hour has just flown by so fast. But if you have been tuning into the show, you know that we are sponsored by Sleeper. And as a part of the holiday season, Sleeper is now launching Santa's $1 million picks giveaway on their Sleeper app. You can play picks between now and December 25th to enter. You choose higher or lower on individual player stats, get them all correct, and you win. You can also pick from a variety of statistical categories in the NFL and NBA. You add players to increase your payout. And for this special promotion that they are launching, each picks entry must be at least $5 to qualify, with up to 4 entries daily per user. So winners will be randomly chosen on 12/26. You can enter again up to 4 times daily. The top 10 prizes are also fully withdrawable. So first prize is 100,000, second prize is 75,000, third prize 50,000, fourth prize is 20,000, with fifth prize being $10,000. Of course, the more you play, the more chances you have to win. And you can sign up today by scanning that QR code on the screen or going to fantasyalarm.com/sleeper. Use promo code VAULT3 for a 100% deposit match up to $100. Of course, I've got my article over there for you at fantasyalarm.com, but let's go through a couple of these with maybe a little couple bonuses thrown in. If you were here on Friday's show, that is still alive. I need Tyreek Hill to have more than 104 receiving yards. So fingers crossed on that one. I'm not going to double up on that receiving yardage pick for tonight, but I am still going to stick with Tyreek Hill. I have him going more than 24 fantasy points at a 1.73 times multiplier. It just seems that no matter what the game script is, that Tyreek Hill is always involved and involved in a big way. Over the past 3 weeks, he's been able to hit this mark, and he does get another soft matchup against the Tennessee Titans secondary. Tennessee has allowed the 10th most fantasy points to the wide receiver position, while Hill is averaging 123 receiving yards per game and has already scored 12 touchdowns on the season. We mentioned he's also averaging 26.1 fantasy points per game, and I love this spot for him. So I'm going more than 24 fantasy points for Tyreek Hill. Take it all the way up, baby. Next, I am looking at Jordan Love, and Love has been playing lights out recently. So I have him more than 16.5 fantasy points at a 1.77 times multiplier. As I mentioned, he has been on fire lately, having at least 18.66 fantasy points over the last 4 games. Even without Christian Watson and Luke Musgrave, he has found a way to spread the ball around to Romeo Doubs, Jaden Reed, and Dontavian Wicks, and even their other rookie tight end, Tucker Kraft. The Giants' defense has not been great this season, and although they've only given up an average of 14.9 fantasy points per game to the quarterback position, it does seem that this has been more of a game script situation as teams have just switched it over to running the ball. With Aaron Jones questionable for tonight, I think that this game may turn out to be more pass heavy than we've seen other teams go with, and Love is set up for another big game. So that is more than 16.5 fantasy points for Jordan Love. Next, I have Saquon Barkley going more than 70.5 rushing yards at a 1.72 times multiplier. And I've mentioned we can't really count on anyone on this Giants offense, even with Tommy DeVito playing better than expected. But Barkley is in such a good spot for a big day today. The Packers defense is allowing an average of over 136 rushing yards per game. And with Barkley handling the majority of the carries, he should see the bulk of these yards. He has hit this match in 2 out of the last 4, and the 2 games that he didn't came against the Dallas Cowboys and New England Patriots, which have much tougher defenses, especially run defenses, than the Packers. Green Bay also may be missing one of their inside linebackers in Quay Walker, so I think this matchup just got a little easier for Barkley, and I expect him to have more than 70.5 rushing yards. If you are sensing a pattern here, you're not wrong, because with my next pick, I'm going Devon Achane more than 13.7 fantasy points at 1.73 times. I'm going to continue harping on Achane and how good he is, and until he proves otherwise, I'm going to continue to count on him. He's averaging 21.4 fantasy points per game, as we mentioned, even with those 2 games of just 1.5 fantasy points. I think that this number may be so low because of how good the Tennessee defense is against the run, but I think that he is as close to his matchup proof as you can get. So I'm going more than 13.7 fantasy points. Finally, to wrap this up, I'm going to look at Jalen Hyatt more than 26.5 receiving yards at 1.77 times. Remember when I said Hyatt is averaging 19.41 yards per reception? To me, this almost seems like a free square, especially with the issues in the Packers secondary. I don't think that he has to be a target monster with an average like that. And in what could and should be a negative game script for New York, I think he sees a few targets to get him over this mark. So I'm going more than 26.5 receiving yards for the rookie Jalen Hyatt. And that wraps up our sleeper picks of the day. Again, to sign up, go to fantasyalarm.com/sleeper. Use the promo code VAULT3, and first-time users get a 100% deposit match up to $100. And make sure to jump into the Santa's $1 million picks giveaway. That is just so much fun. And anytime that you have a chance to win free money just by entering and just by playing, you've got to do that. So that about wraps up our show. Again, to get the All Pro subscription on Fantasy Alarm, make sure to go to fantasyalarm.com/win, scan that QR code, use the promo code Let's Go for 50% off your first monthly payment. And again, we've got the Better Cast going tonight. Not only do we have the doubleheader for Monday Night Football, but we've got Moose and Keith trivia at 7 p.m. Eastern. Get involved in that game. Scan that QR code, go to the Apple app and Google Play stores, download that, put in your pregame picks, answer questions throughout the game, hang out with all of us in the chat. And if you win, you can win tickets for real redeemable prizes. Always, again, so much fun when you can talk with your friends and win free prizes. So that's going to do it for today's show. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Thank you to my producer, Brian Burns. Coming up next on the Better Sports Network and Fantasy Alarm YouTube from 4 to 5 p.m., we have the Better Sports Betting Show with Dan Servadidio and Howard Bender, followed from 5 to 6 p.m. with the NBA DFS Live Show with John Impemba and James Grande. Make sure to check that out. I will be back here, same place, same time on Friday. Until then, we'll see you in the Better Cast app. Good luck in all your matchups. And thanks, as always, for getting blitzed.